Welcome to Season 2 of the Erotic Realm podcast, where we explore the world of eroticism, one erotic realm at a time. I'm Em, a sexologist and kinkster. The mission of the Erotic Realm is to humanize desire in all of its forms, including darker desires. Each episode, we dive deep into the psychology of desire with a sexpert, everyday kinkster, or a kink expert. This is an independent podcast. To support it, please consider becoming a paid subscriber at psychologyofdesire.com, where you'll also find deep dives into desire and surveys that you can participate in. You can also sign up there to get the podcast delivered directly to your inbox when it's released. And now for today's episode. Before we get started, I have something very excited to announce. The podcast has been nominated for the Australian Adult Industry Awards in the category of Best Podcast. So if you'd love to vote for the Erotic Realm to win this category, it would be amazing to have your support. I'll put a link to the voting website in the show notes, and I'd really appreciate it if you could give it a click and a vote, and who knows, maybe it will win Best Podcast. Thank you so much for listening and for your support. If you'd like to support the podcast, please consider checking out the brands that support the Erotic Realm. There's FirmTech, whose tech ring offers fascinating insights into sexual health by tracking erection quality and nocturnal function. Splash Blanket, who create luxurious waterproof blankets designed for comfort, intimacy, and real-life messes. ProDX Health, who offer discreet, at-home STI testing. While Karoo and Lovents make premium pleasure technology, from couple toys to long-distance interactive devices. Then there's Lioness, who are doing something truly unique in sex tech, using biofeedback and orgasm data to help people better understand their arousal. I'm also partnering with Flow and Desire, science-backed libido support supplements designed to support sexual vitality and well-being. These are brands that I find genuinely interesting, science-backed, and I've used them myself, so they come with my recommendation. You can find the links to all of them in the episode description. If you try them, use the links below. It supports the show at no extra cost to you. And now, back to today's conversation. The following conversation explores a question that very few people ever have the chance to answer. What is it like growing up as the child of a porn performer? My guest today is filmmaker, storyteller, and creative producer Laila Ocean, whose upcoming documentary Unbound explores sexuality, family, stigma, identity, and the stories that shape our desires. Together we explore what it was like discovering her father's career in the adult industry, how pornography shaped and didn't shape her understanding of intimacy, and what happens when you inherit a relationship to sexuality that most people never experience. We also discuss media narratives about porn, sexual freedom, cultural stigma, and the extraordinary power of storytelling to reshape how we understand ourselves and each other. And for listeners of the Erotic Realm, there's an extra connection here. Laila is currently creating a documentary featuring King Noir, who previously joined me on the podcast to share his very own erotic realm. This is a conversation about that documentary Unbound, but also about family, identity, sexuality, and the stories that quietly shape our desire. Enjoy. Hi everyone, and welcome to the Erotic Realm. Today we're exploring the erotic realm with Laila Ocean. Welcome, Laila.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for being here. So to start us off, can we get an idea of your day-to-day life? Who is Laila Ocean and what are you up to?
What a lovely jumping off point. I have a day-to-day life that involves my two beautiful children, ages 13 and 11. And so when I'm with them, I take them to school and feed them and conversate with them about the goings on of the world. In my professional life, I am embarking upon a new endeavor as a first-time filmmaker, a documentarian, and it's a really exciting chapter for me. Along with that, I am a creative spirit through and through. I'm a painter. I am a dancer. I look for all the ways to express myself when the spirit moves, and each layer of my creative being feeds the other. So on a day-to-day basis, I'm dabbling in all of those things as well as being a mom.
Amazing. So I really want to hear more about the doco in a moment. But just so people can situate you, can we hear a little bit about your eroticism? So, how do you identify in terms of your sexuality and your kink identity, if you have one?
Sure. I identify as queer. I have explored a number of different lanes in the kink realm.
Hmm.
I've tended towards the submissive side, although I always hesitate to put a single hat on because I am a bit of a chameleon. I've dabbled in BDSM play and specifically impact play. And it's something that I is always just kind of in the back of my mind, like, what might I like to try next? More
Mm.
than it's I'm this one thing and this is what I'm into.
Okay, wonderful. So, can you tell us more about the documentary that you mentioned? You said it's your first foray into film making and creating a documentary. What's it about?
Yeah, so the title is Unbound, Crowned in Pleasure. And it is a documentary that explores the lives of jet setting Jasmine and King Noir, who are adult entertainers. They are parents. They are multi hyphenates who have accolades across adult entertainment, in the mental health space, in the education, sexuality education space. And so the film is following them and their careers and what it's like to build a family in this highly stigmatized industry that operates under an extraordinary amount of pressure as compared to the quote unquote mainstream from a policy standpoint and from a stigma standpoint. So the goal of the doc is to really create a humanized and nuanced view of really incredible people doing really incredible things that are often so much subject to judgment and discrimination because of this very outdated stigma.
Mm-hmm. So, where did the idea for the documentary come from? Was there a gradual build up to the idea, or was there a particular event in your life that occurred where you were like, I need to make this?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think, it's one of those things that the best way to describe it is that the universe really had this for me. It was something that in one way, shape, or form kept coming back around to me as a purpose-driven project. I didn't always know what story I was going to tell in connection with adult entertainment. Uh, but being a dope myself, which is an acronym that stands for Daughter of Porn Entertainer, uh, I have had this passion and drive in me to to tell my story. Um, and in my connection with King and Jasmine and their adult daughters, as well as their younger children, there evolved this really kindred spirit.
Mm.
And it my role as a storyteller has evolved beyond my own story and really has become this creative partnership where I'm through the depth of connection that we have grown, I'm now in this position to tell their story, and which is our story. And when I say our, I mean those of us who have some connection, which is more people than you would realize, to the sex trade industry, whether it's a mother, a brother, a cousin, a neighbor, a colleague. Um, Sex work is a billions of dollars industry and employs a lot of people. And so I want it to live in an elevated artistic space and in discourse where it receives the respect and the dignity that it deserves, and create a positive representation and an affirmation, to carve out against all of the really flattened stereotypes and negative tropes that exist around adult entertainment.
Very powerful. So you mentioned being a dope, which I hadn't heard that acronym before, and I'm sure a lot of people haven't. What is it like being the daughter of a porn entertainer? What would you like people to know about your experience growing up and how you view porn yourself?
Yeah, well, let me back up a second because I cannot take credit for that acronym. I
hmm
was as excited about it as you are when I first heard it. It was King and Jasmine's adult daughters that coined that term.
Ah,
And when I first heard it used was in a presentation that they were participating in with the Sexual Health Alliance. It was about sex positive parenting. And when I heard them speaking and answering the kinds of questions like what you've just asked me, I had tears streaming down my face because it harkened really to what my lived experience was growing up in a sex positive household, which isn't necessarily connected to having a parent who's in adult entertainment. They can go together.
hmm
Um, but so hearing them speak about what it was like to grow up in a shame-free environment where they were given proper sex education and they were allowed to pursue pleasure as a natural function of the human body, given vocabulary to understand their own bodies. And so I heard them speaking on these subjects that were near and dear to my own experience. And I had participated with my father in academic settings as well at UC Berkeley, UCLA, Stanford, courses in human sexuality where they were very interested in, again, in the question that you just asked. So going back to your question, what was it like? I had a really affirming childhood in the sense of so much love, so much care. The number one value in my household was truth.
Mm.
So I really trusted my parents to give me good information, whether it was about sex or the world at large, fill in the blank. And I learned of my dad's career in adult entertainment at age appropriate stages. It wasn't this bomb that was dropped at any particular time.
Mm.
It was really, you know, my parents were both very creative people. I would say they both identify as artists on top of all the various things that they do. So by the time that I had a sense of what porn or adult entertainment was, I was already just, I already had admiration and respect for who my parents were at large, their politics, their sense of justice and community and artistry. And so porn was just one layer of that for my dad's side of things.
Okay, fascinating. I was wondering how you found out about his career and if it was like a bomb dropped on you, as you said, or a gradual process. Can you share more about the process of how they described it to you? You said it was age appropriate. So can you take us into that a little bit more?
Yeah. So the first layer of language that I had around what my dad's career had been was that daddy makes adult movies. Okay, that sufficed for a very long time.
Mm.
And so the story goes, I don't have this viscerally in my own memory, but it's like folklore of the family. So the story goes, I started interrogating, well, what makes them adult movies?
hmm
And my reference point was movies that we were not allowed to see, and that was horror films. So I said, what makes them adult? Is it like Silence of the Lambs? And my dad actually really cringed at that thought because of what that, actually quite difficult to explain horror films to a young person.
mm.
And he just recoiled. That was not his preferred art form. So I said, what makes them adult? Sex? And he goes, yeah. So as the story goes, again, I run to my sister and I go say to my sister, Daddy makes sex movies. And she was the older sister. And she just said, so, and that was that.
Hmm.
It's a very unfantastic story. I thought it was a cool piece of information. She, wouldn't let me have the scoop. And then from then on, it was just, okay, that was something that my dad had done. And we learned to, at subsequent ages, this isn't something that you chat to your friends about at school. This is something that, is for our family to know. We don't know what other kids or their families might feel about that. This is family information. And then, the idea of age appropriate is still not a one size fits all. It's really also kid appropriate. And by that, I mean, answering the questions that your kids bring to you, as opposed to, oh, they've turned to this age. Now it's time for the fill in the blank talk, So I actually had very few questions about my dad's career. He retired the year that I was born. And it was just a fact of what he had done. He continued to have relationships with people in the industry, go to industry events. If he would have people from the industry come to the house, my sister and I were always very aware of kind of the glam of it. We were drawn to the costuming of people in that industry, from a young kid's perspective. But I love my parents so much. And like I said, it was not the central conversation that was happening in our household at any given point in time.
Mm-hmm. So, how do you feel like your sexuality or your relationship to desire would be different if your father wasn't in porn? Is that possible to imagine and speak to?
It's a funny question. I think it also plays into the sense of purpose I have around telling this story, is making sense of how important this has been to me. I was actually just having this conversation with my mom the other day about the importance of this aspect of my lineage, so to speak, has long had to do with pushing back against the hypocrisy that I observe in society as an adult. And by that, I mean, porn is mass consumed, and yet people who consume this form of entertainment readily are the same people that look down on it as a lesser than profession. And I could never circle that square just in terms of the world at large. It made no sense to me. So that's sort of like the bigger piece of my identity. And in that, having grown up with a very, permission focused rationale around identity formation and becoming whoever it is that you are in the realm of the kind of pleasure that you want and who you want to experience it with, or how you want to experience it with yourself. I put those two things together. It felt like a superpower. Like, I feel no shame in my body for the things that I'm feeling or want to explore. And I feel like I have this superpower in terms of seeing the wasted energy of this hypocrisy. And I didn't always know what I was going to do with that. And it is hard to imagine being anybody other than me. And I think for the first time in my life, being able to concentrate my perspective into this filmmaking medium with like-minded folks who are living this reality at one level or another, whether as the family member of a sex worker, or as a sex worker, as an advocate, as an artist, all the people whose lives this theme touches, being able to link arms together and shed light on the fact that simply because somebody engages in sex as part of their profession, in no way, shape, or form inherently makes them unfit to be a parent, unsuitable for society. It's just such a preposterous assumption to make about somebody working in this oldest profession. And so I feel like I'm becoming more and more myself every day, the deeper I get into this project, because at least from my little corner of the world, there is this critical mass around this issue. It's like there is a lot of scholarship on it. And although we are in a really frightening time in terms of policy it's actively working to censor freedom of speech online and freedom of expression and create policy that makes life much less safe for sex workers and in turn their families, there is this deep sense of resistance. And that goes to my bigger sense of justice upbringing on all issues, that when you see an injustice, you don't sit idly by and accept the status quo. So pushing on this issue feels so central to who I am. And it just feels like there is a community, a global community that is pushing this conversation forward to change the way that material conditions are for sex workers.
Wow. So much to unpack there. It's such incredible work you're doing. Thank you so much for doing it. It's so powerful and much needed with the rise of OnlyFans and the discussion of sex work that we see in the media all the time now, especially because it is still largely quite negative. And we need these positive stories to hopefully balance out that negativity and show that there are real humans doing this work and it's part of daily life.
That's right. And you know, one of the things that I have encountered in my adult life is actually that people engaged, in particular in the kink community, I've found that there is actually quite advanced relationship to consent that the general population may not have developed to quite an expert level. And I'm sure it depends on which community of kinksters you're a part of, but I've really seen such an inspiring fine-tuning of how to discuss bodily autonomy, desires, limits, safety, care. I think there's so much to learn from a pleasure-centered politics. When you go with an abstinence-only mindset, you know, whether it's around sexual pleasure or drug use, you suppress this very real human urge for pleasure in many forms. And so I have just always had this sense that education and skills are the way that we will be able to successfully navigate life. And the kink community has only further validated that to me. And I think that's something that maybe the average person doesn't know about kink.
Yes. Yep. Thank goodness for kink and its focus on consent. You're so right. There's a quote I wanted to explore with you, and it's by Clarissa Pinkola Estes, who wrote the book Women Who Run with the Wolves. And she says, "Stories are medicine. I have been taken with stories since I heard my first. They have such power. They do not require that we do, be, act, anything. We need only listen." So when you hear this quote, does it describe one of the reasons why you felt this desire to create this documentary? Do you believe in the power of the story and putting people's story out there?
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's really beautifully said. It's really beautifully said. And what I'm so encouraged by or excited about, ignited around with film in particular, is the number of access points to our emotional being. The music, the color, the heart, the way that this medium can reach us in places that are pure intellect may not allow us to is really where I feel this big opening and sense of possibility around this issue is, yeah, it's telling the story, and even more than telling the story, it's showing the story. It's the score, the music, King's music is able to create a rhythm and a cadence to how it feels to be in this story. And so, yes, 100% yes. And, I think I'm creating what I wish I would have seen at some point in my life. Not like I consciously wished I would have seen, but thinking about what would have given me a deeper sense of place and community in the world would have been to see this film that doesn't exist yet, that we're creating. And I know that to be true based on how my heart has expanded and become more grounded since coming into connection with King and Jasmine and their family. I felt such a deepened sense of place. And I think in that as well, the stories that bring us together, like I mentioned earlier, there are more people than anyone realizes that are connected to this story by sheer numbers of people who are involved in this industry. And so I feel like there will be a coming out of the woodwork, if you will, of people who have some connection to this. And so I'm really, really excited.
Yeah, it sounds like you'll create a new little community around the documentary, which is really exciting. I'd love to explore a piece of research here because there's this other side of pornography, right, where people look at the negative implications of it a lot. So this is research titled Adolescence and Pornography, a review of 20 years of research. And it looked at the impacts of pornography on young people. So they looked at the research over the span of 20 years, and they concluded that pornography use was associated with more permissive sexual attitudes and tended to be linked with stronger gender stereotypical sexual beliefs. And it also seemed to be related to the occurrence of sexual intercourse, greater experience with casual sex behavior, and more sexual aggression, both in terms of perpetration and victimization. However, they also recognized that there was a negativity bias in the research they reviewed, and that it was often looking for the negative impacts of pornography use and not neutral or positive impacts. So are you surprised by the findings of this review, and do you agree with it? As an insider of the industry, do you think that porn leads to casual sex or sexual aggression, for example?
There's so much to unpack there. The bias just in the term leading to permissiveness. It's pejorative even in the way that that's framed. There's a moral judgment in some sense about sexual activity, period, by the way that study is framed.
Right.
I'll also say that, not all porn is created equal. A large part, like any media, there are harmful tropes and stereotypes perpetuated in cinema, in the mainstream, as well as in porn. And do those negative stereotypes do harm? Absolutely. What is being modeled in the forms of entertainment that we consume, whether it's porn or film or music, those are all cultural influences, and we have to be mindful of all of those inputs. I think porn gets put under a microscope because of that moral judgment on sexual behavior, but I think we do a disservice towards understanding the whole picture of influence when we separate it out as though it is separate and distinct from this larger question of human behavior and of culture. So that's my initial thought. And I like the phrase teaching porn literacy, because it is important that there is an ethical standard around the entertainment we're consuming. Again, whether it's Hollywood or whether it's porn, we want to insist that there are safe sets, that we know that there are, opportunities for each of the participants involved to state their boundaries and their desires and know that there is not coercion involved. And so it is important for me, especially as a documentarian, the goal is not to paint a rosy picture of the industry as though there aren't horrible things happening that have happened and that continue to happen.
Mm-hmm.
It's just important not to take it as isolated to that industry. I think we learned from the Me Too movement that sexual harassment and abuse are pervasive throughout society. And so addressing the kinds of power dynamics and conditions that exist in all workplaces are also present in porn. I'll say, from the perspective of a parent now, you want to have tabs on what your kid is consuming on the internet. This is a brave new world. The internet, was barely new in my adolescence. And so I think for me, it's all about literacy. What are you finding? How do you know if it's safe to proceed? And these are the types of courses, quite frankly, that King and Jasmine are at the forefront of, and that, thank goodness, there are other folks, aligned organizations that are leading with porn literacy and saying everything that you find on the internet is not created equal. Let's make sure that you know how you're navigating these things and that you have the tools to understand what you're finding and do so safely. So I know that there's a lot of great resources out there. And although our documentary isn't specifically an educational documentary, it will certainly, viewers will leave knowing where to find more good information. There are a wealth of workshops available around porn literacy now. And I just think it's a much more human and realistic approach to interacting with this medium than saying, going the just say no route. Because let's be real, people are going to find porn and relate to it. The main thing is that porn is for adults. All adult things are and can be problematic for kids, and that's why they are labeled as adult.
Mm-hmm.
I really feel like internet literacy should include being clear about that with our kids and lay the groundwork for them to proceed with media literacy across the board.
So what do you personally think is the biggest misconception about pornography and its impact on young people?
The biggest misconception. I guess that I think the biggest I think I want to answer that a different way, which is
sure.
The biggest issue that I see is that there's a vacuum of sex education and porn has replaced that. So if kids are going to porn to learn about how to prevent transmission of an STI, they will be woefully unable to find what they were looking for. It's not a place for kids to learn how to navigate those kinds of sexual health subjects. Or so it's not explicitly education based. There are resources. So I think some of the creator companies now provide, if you go to this.org, you can find our education, but it really shines a light on the need for more in-depth sex education across society. And so that way youth aren't mistaking that as their education around anatomy, physiology. There needs to be a balance so that it can be understood for what it is, which is entertainment.
Mm-hmm. I'd like to dive into the documentary a bit deeper now. Can you share more about what we're going to see in the documentary?
Yeah, so that is a work in progress.
Mm-hmm.
And I I was saying to somebody the other day, you when you do a science experiment, you go in with your hypothesis and you think this is the film we're definitely, or this is the findings I expect to get from the study. But you don't want to have a bias towards your hypothesis and miss what the data actually ends up presenting to you. So I have my strong ideas and goals of where we want to go in the film. And I'm also open to the fact that what happens in life for King and Jasmine and their family over the period of time that we're filming will inform what the film is about.
Mm-hmm.
And so there are various threads that we're going to follow. One of them is an ancestral journey back to West Africa, retracing lineage predating the transatlantic slave trade, the kidnapping of ancestors from the African continent, and all of the harm that has ensued from that violence and that incredibly lengthy and horrific history. And so much of the work that Royal Fetish Films, King and Jasmine's production company, has done has been about decolonizing sex. And you know this from having spoken to King on your podcast. He explains it so well. So the idea of the return is that we'll actually end up at the Sexual Freedom Festival in Benin, West Africa. And it will be an opportunity to reclaim. We talked about affirming representations of sexuality. So that element will be there. There will be a history lesson throughout because that's who King and Jasmine are and the work that they do.
Mm-hmm.
So it will be a history lesson at large, but through a personal history lens. We'll see King's music up close and personal. He has an extraordinary library of music dating back to the early thousands, in and through different aspects of his political personality and inclinations, all the way through to current, where his music is really steeped in themes around adult entertainment, really incredible, sensual, rhythmic hip hop music that lights up a room. I've seen it now in an awards environment where he was asked to perform at the Trans Erotica Awards. In fact, he performed a number of years in a row. And seeing the way that those themes were received in that room on stage, this incredible music. So music will be a huge element. And then there's just going to be verite. There's going to be opportunity to just be with these people and their day-to-day lives, like how you started the podcast. What is your day like? What is your week like? And that really intimate human experience of just being with people. And I hope that our creative approach and artistic approach will allow for both the stage and the living room to be layered together.
It sounds incredible. So am I understanding this correctly? The idea is that you'll be doing a kind of case study on their family and just showing people what their life is like over a certain period of time. So you're kind of following them around on their journey for like a year or something like this.
That's right. Yeah. And there are already so many existing things in their schedules and lives where I want to be, and I want to get all of it. And there will be things that change because such is the nature of life, and such is the nature in particular of this industry. It's not a typical 9 to 5. It is a shifting policy landscape. And we're living in really volatile times politically, period. And so what will happen, over the course of this period of time, will be fluid and in response to it. And what I'm really also excited about is this collaborative model. We're really making this film together. And my dad, I was catching up with him about the project and my role in it. And all the different elements. And he said, it occurs to me that your role in telling this story that needs to be told is that you're the midwife
Mm-hmm.
of the story. And it just took my breath away. It completely described how this process feels to me. There's an element of mystery. There's an element of, it's a group effort. No one no one person can create this film. We're doing it together, and my job is to be the midwife. And so although King and Jasmine and their family are central to the story, we've already had a group of incredible advisors come on to the project. Performer named Jiz Lee, who's the editor of Coming Out Like a Porn Star, incredible essayist. And I was so honored when they agreed to participate. And if you haven't checked out the book of essays, Coming Out Like a Porn Star, that's a must read. We have Professor Dr. Mireille Miller-Young out of UC Santa Barbara. And we have Holly Randall, who's another podcaster, and also a person whose parent was in the adult business as a photographer. So we just have this amazing community around the film. And the idea in this early stage too is to bring along our kinksters, bring along anyone that wants to support the film because they believe in a world where sex is not shamed. We are able to have sex positive conversations with our children, where we're able to protect sex workers' rights as basic human rights, and reduce stigma and create laws that actually uplift and support all of us. Anybody that believes in those things we can all join arms and go together and create this beautiful piece of art that can stand up. And I see us all celebrating together at the end of this journey, knowing that we shifted things, that we did not lay down when all of this dangerous conflation was happening that tried to collapse all forms of erotic art with trafficking. Trafficking is a real problem and it needs to be addressed. But erotic art, porn, sex work, these are not the same things. And we have to be very careful when that dangerous narrative gets puppeted all over the place and people react, have a knee-jerk reaction against those things. So I believe fiercely in a pleasure politics, that we need to experience pleasure in order to be our best, most human selves. And that's actually going to allow us to continue to advocate for life on this planet as human beings, which feels precarious at the moment.
I'm right there with you. Yes to pleasure and yes to more of it. Where can people find out more about the project and support it happening?
Yeah, so right now we're so excited. The project has become fiscally sponsored by the International Documentary Association.
Amazing.
And yes, thank you. And so we have our fundraising page for the film up at documentary.org/project/unbound-crowned-pleasure. And I'm sure you have a chat you can drop that into.
Yeah.
It's long, but it's on the International Documentary Association page. And yeah, on that page, you can view the trailer for the film, read a little bit about it. But we're building this in real time with our community. And it's just so exciting to be connected globally. I was really, really touched when I reached out to you that this struck a chord, and that completely serendipitously and coincidentally that you had just had King on your podcast, and neither of us knew that at the moment that we connected. So yeah, very cool.
It was meant to be. Well, I'm sure there'll be many people listening that want to reach out and support the project. So thank you for sharing that. And I'll be sure to put the link in the show notes as well, so people can find it really easily.
Absolutely. And I am on Instagram. If anybody wants to find me there, it's at Laila.Ocean.
Amazing. Thank you. Now, I did share with my audience that I was having a podcast guest on who was the child of a male porn star, or a dope, as you mentioned. And
Yes.
I had many listener questions come through. So normally I would just pick one, but they were also
Okay.
interesting. So I've picked 4 for you today.
Okay.
Okay, so the first one is, do you feel that your perceptions of relationships are vastly different than that of others in your community? Why or why not?
I I don't think so. I don't
Mhm.
think that my perception of relationships is vastly different. I
Mhm.
think my foundation was different, but I would say that my foundation, as I mentioned around the sex positive values of my household, that was actually the thing that made me more unique than my dad's career. You know, I knew a lot of people growing up that, you know, their households had a don't ask, don't tell kind of policy around sex, or don't do it at all, or it's wrong if you do it, or so that is the thing that I think made me the most different. That gave me, I do feel like I had a really extraordinary opportunity to develop, first and foremost, a relationship to my own body before I even considered uh, partnered sex,
Mhm.
if you will. So I think that was more my superpower. I think my dad's career, I did, you know, before I really fully understood the stigma, I really felt like it was swaggy. Like it was, I was proud of my dad. I thought of him as a celebrity. You know, I thought he was on the cover of Playgirl magazine 1979. Like to me, that he was an icon. And that
Mm.
was something that I felt very proud of. And I haven't always had a way to channel that pride because the world doesn't really know what to do with it. But being able to tell my story now, I feel is my opportunity to channel that pride and to say I can be proud of who he was. I don't consume his art. That's a boundary for me, you
Mhm.
know, but I can be proud, you know, objectively speaking, of what he contributed to that world and the values that I was raised with and the amazing human being that he is.
Mhm. Mhm. It's funny you just said that about not consuming his art because one of the next questions is about that. Has knowing he did porn ever made porn itself feel emotionally complicated? Have you felt anxious to watch porn for fear of seeing him in something or because of the connection he has to it?
No,
Mhm.
I have always felt very clear how to steer clear.
Yep.
No issues there. And that goes again to the literacy thing. We can be very deliberate in, you know, what we click on and the places that we go. So no, I have not had that anxiety. You know, I in my own, you know, relationship to porn, it ebbs and flows of it being a form of entertainment that I use in my personal life. But no, that if anything, you know, I'm again, the element of being shame free around it is just one hurdle I haven't had to deal with inside of myself.
Mm-hmm. I think you may have answered this one already, but I'll ask it in case you have something else to speak to. How has your father's profession shaped your education on sexuality in ways that others might not expect?
Yeah, I, I'm trying to think what I can say that I haven't said already.
Yeah, I feel like you might have
I,
spoken to that. Mm-hmm.
yeah, I mean, I definitely feel like I allowed myself a sense of range
Mm.
from the time that I became sexually active. I felt a sense I am able to try a wide number of things. I do think that there is, and I'm exploring, this is another thing I'm exploring in the film, is what does it mean to fuck like a porn star, quote unquote? Because this is a lyric that shows up in a variety of musical genres, and it's almost folkloric in the sense that it can represent a lot of things. But I did take on this sense that I have prowess. It was
Mm.
something that, you know, I felt I get to claim that but I think it's something we don't completely understand what it means, and we don't give performers their flowers for what a difficult task it is to do. It's so often looked down on, but it's a craft and a skill like any other form of performing in its own right. So yeah, I did inherit a sense personally. My siblings can speak for themselves, but I did think of it as an element of swag and prowess. But really, I think that was about the sex positivity and the shame-free environment.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And the last listener question is, if you could change anything about the porn industry, what would it be and why?
Racism.
Mm.
It's really, as somebody that has also dedicated a lot of my energy and adult life towards social justice and racial justice issues broadly, it's a really gross manifestation of the history of racism in this country and the world for it to be exploited for as a form of entertainment, sexual entertainment. So I think that's another area where I have really been inspired by how King and Jasmine have approached their production company and the things that, racism in America is not unique, like we said, with just as with sexual violence. It's not unique to any one industry. It's something that has become taken for granted as okay in porn and apologized for. And it's really time to move past that. And for all companies that are engaged in this form of entertainment to be held to a higher standard.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And what about for listeners who are porn creators and parents? What advice would you give them for raising their children?
I think the more frank and unglamorous, the less pressure there are on these subjects, the better.
Mm-hmm.
There is a way to approach it as in the same breath as any other developmental issue that you might be covering in your kid's life, and you can take it one step at a time and seek resources. There are many. And if you don't feel like you have language around something yet, you can develop it but to have confidence and courage that, nothing is going to explode if you navigate a conversation with your kid about sex, about porn, and you can find ways to navigate that are real. You can have a conversation that will instill trust. I think for a kid to feel like they can get good information from their parent is huge, as opposed to just being shoved away and told don't. I know it gives me a sense of confidence, like my kids will come to me and ask me questions about anything and know that they'll be talking to someone that is actually talking to them about the world that they live in, as opposed to telling them, painting a picture for them that is not based in the reality that they observe.
Mm-hmm. Beautifully said. Is there anything else that you'd like to share with the listeners today about porn or your project or another issue that you wish we'd touched upon but haven't?
I don't think so. This was expansive and deep and beautiful, and I'm excited to keep sharing with your listeners as I go on this journey. And as I said, having people come with is paramount, because I'm one person and I'm not the mouthpiece for all all dopes, like I'm one person, and I want us to create this together in community. And so by investing in the film, whoever, like I said, links arm with us and come together, you're a part of this and will be from its creation through its touring and all the stages that we hope and theaters we hope to be in. So come along with us.
I'm sure many will. I can't wait to see the finished product. And of course, you're welcome to come back on the podcast when that's ready to tell us all about the journey and how it's gone for you and what you've learnt along the way. I'm really looking forward to it.
Thank you so much for having me.
Of course. So if you had to sum up your eroticism in one word right now, what would that word be and why?
I get one word.
Yep. A hard one.
Curious.
Mm-hmm.
Curious would be my word.
Mm-hmm. And why so?
I'm excited by what I haven't explored yet.
Yeah.
Even if it's exploring something from a new angle, showing up with fresh eyes all the time, the sense of wonderment and permission, always coming back to permission inside of myself to source where my interest may lie, and know that, and I think actually having listened to King's episode just before I came on, I really loved when he said, you can have different sexual experiences every time, this idea that there's one way or 5 ways to do this thing when we have these bodies with so many nerve endings and we have these minds with so many pathways. It truly feels like there's infinite possibilities for how to live and feel pleasure in our bodies. And I want to always remind myself of that and go back to that place of curiosity.
What a beautiful message.
The last piece that I wanted an opportunity to add in, I had mentioned about the various advisors that are connected to the project. And in speaking on that, I realized that not only had I forgot to mention the amazing Marla Renee Stewart, but also the fact that as an advisor, she specifically will be representing research coming out of the Unveiling Desires project, which actually has just done the most recent round of data presentation to a group of academics and folks working in the sex education space and clinical space as well. And that research explores BIPOC fetishistic desires using a unique data set from voluntary fetish surveys that has been collected over the past decade. So this is a study that was based on this survey collected through a platform both on the Royal Fetish Films website as well as in King and Jasmine's in-person practice. And so the study provides insights into a sexually suppressed and underrepresented demographic. And the interpretation of the data is something that through this research project will make its way into the film. And we want to use the documentary as a way to make that data and its findings accessible for maximum public health benefit and, its ability to shift the landscape of understanding of BIPOC sexual desire. So that is a really key piece of the documentary that we didn't get to talk about. And Marla is a phenomenal award-winning sexologist. And I mean, her accolades are the resume is long. And so I'm humbled and grateful to be able to have her as a representative from the Unveiling Desires team to the Unbound documentary to ensure that that data is represented in a really fundamentally true way to the spirit of the research.
That sounds like incredible research. I'm really fascinated by that. And yeah, Marla, you said Marla, correct? She sounds amazing.
Marla Renee Stewart. Mm-hmm. Yeah, she's incredible. Mm-hmm. And I will share her information as well. She'd be a great person to have on your podcast.
Yeah, I'd love to dive deep into that data and whatever else she's been up to. I'll have to look her up. So thank you for shining a light on her and her work. It sounds incredible. Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. Yes, I have her. I did pull the site up to so I could drop her name. It's her org is called Velvet Lips Sex Ed.
Cool.
And she's a co-founder of the Sex Down South conference.
Yes. Yep.
Yeah. So I've not been, but it's definitely on my list of things to do. And I've just been it's been so wonderful connecting with folks on that team, and the crossover between the research coming out of that project and what we can highlight in our film. And of course, the full circle connection here is that the team has been booked to present those findings at the event in Benin, West Africa. So that is another element. That's what jogged my memory, was like, oh, I spoke about how in the film we want to take this journey. We are going to take this journey along with King and Jasmine to this event in Benin. And the research from Unveiling Desires will be presented there. So really cool opportunity to shine light on, a pre-colonial era in sexual desire for Black folks. So the team has been phenomenal, and the data presentation that I was able to participate in a couple of nights ago was really phenomenal. And so I know that there is a lot more to come for the tour of that research, and many more implications for research to come. When sex workers and BIPOC folk are empowered to, steer the research and not be the subject of the research without say in how that research is done. And really inspiring work.
Yeah, it sounds incredibly empowering, and I'm so curious to see what comes from this movement. It feels like there's quite a bit of momentum building behind this project, and all of the people involved sound absolutely incredible. So I'm really excited to see what happens next for you and the project.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate you. This has been a pleasure to connect. I know those of us that are in pleasure politics, we say the word pleasure a lot because we mean it. I mean, we know how to really dive in and express ourselves and what we're passionate about. So thank you. I really feel that come through in your work.
Oh, thank you so much. Do you feel like there's anything else you want to speak to at this moment? Do you feel like we've covered everything? Is there anything else left in your mind or your heart about this project?
Yeah, I'm just really excited. Every conversation is bringing more momentum and more folks into the fold. So, I think we had spoken before about your listeners and the kinds of things that they're interested in, and anyone that feels so called to make a donation towards the charitable cause of this project, they will be coming along this journey from all the way through, and we'll have a community around this that is standing up for the basic human rights of all people, which includes sex workers and their families. So that stays on my heart. I feel like I probably won't stop saying that for the rest of my life, but certainly for the scope of this film.
Great. Well, Laila, thank you so much for sharing your story with us today, and for the documentary you're creating with Unbound. With the rise of OnlyFans and the censorship of sexual content, it's an interesting time for porn in our society, and I really appreciate you sharing your experience and upbringing with us today. So thank you for opening up this conversation, and thank you for taking us into your erotic realm.
Thank you so much.
Thanks again. I'm Em, and this has been the Erotic Realm Podcast.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Erotic Realm Podcast. This is an independent podcast. If you want to see more episodes made, you can support it at psychologyofdesire.com by becoming a paid subscriber and entering the realm with many other supporters. The mission of the Erotic Realm is to humanize kink and desire in all of its forms. And we can't do that without you. Until the next time, stay perverted.